In the next video, we are finally going to hack our very first machine. I hope you are as excited as I am to do it. Before we get started, there's one last thing you need to know in order to understand what will happen on your screen. It is unfortunately not always possible to have visual access to the target. We will not necessarily always see our target's desktop with the mouse and the actions that our target performs on the machine. Because to have this type of access, the machine we are attacking will need to have existing and active software that allows remote access. Instead, we will most likely access a remote shell. If you remember the terminal commands we have seen in the introduction to Linux and Bash scripting, well, all those commands are made possible thanks to the shell. The shell, in essence, is the interface between the kernel and everything else. Even when you use a graphical user interface, everything and every programs are tied to the shell under the hood somehow. Meaning that if you succeed to compromise a machine or a specific piece of software, the goal is to get a foothold on your target. You need to be able to access the target remotely. If you are able to pop a shell, then you can execute commands on your target. There are two types of shell you can get in a pentest: bind shell and reverse shell. With reverse shells, you are listening on a port on your own machine and you instruct your target to connect to you. With bind shells, it's the contrary. You instruct your target machine to listen on a specific port and then you connect to it with your own machine. The use of a reverse shell versus the use of a bind shell depends on the context. If you are inside your client's network, then you can simply perform reverse shells without having to worry about anything. But if you are trying to connect to something from your home network to another network, you have to remember that your home router is using NAT. And therefore, you should specifically open a port to the outside world for a reverse shell to work, since, by default, for the outside world, all of your devices are but a single IP address, and that's where bind shells can be more appropriate.